Welcome back to KTN Prime. It's now time to evaluate President William Ruto's third State of the Nation address, where he defended his administration's handling of the economy while highlighting the major gains made in various sectors which are key to Kenya's economy. And we're set to evaluate the president's speech with my guests tonight, taking stock of the real state of the nation. Allow me to introduce my guests. I'll start with the gentleman right next to me. Dr. Martin Olo joins us tonight. He's an advocate and an experienced governance specialist. Asante sana for your time. He's not a night runner, so this is definitely a sacrifice.
Thank you for having me.
Asante sana for your time. Equally joined by Dr. Joseph Mugashia, who's a co-convener of Concerned Citizens Movement of Kenya. Not new to the show. Asante sana. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for your time. Equally joined by Patrick Obath, who is active in private sector advocacy and equally the vice chair of the International Chamber of Commerce Executive Board. Obath, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here today.
Thanks for your time. And perhaps we could start with taking a look at what Kenyans will be waking up to tomorrow on Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard. The headline is quite bold, as always. And as you'll see it shortly on your screens, it highlights that the president's State of the Nation address was simply out of touch. It didn't highlight the key areas that Kenyans wanted highlighted. Kenyans are facing rising living costs, economic pressures, and worsening insecurity. But Ruto offered aspirational promises, but left the country's most urgent problems untouched. Perhaps you can start with a general outlook of the president's State of the Nation address. Starting with you, Obath, what's your take on 3 years into this Kenya Kwanza administration?
I think when you look at the macros that he talked about, the inflation rates. He talked about the currency and all that. Those have tracked exactly the way he said. And which is good. I mean, it's bringing some stability into the economy and is sending the right signals about the general economy in Kenya. The one thing it doesn't and didn't address was the micro. And the macro looks good, but the micro, which is what affects me and you every day, the two were not related at all in terms of what you see. So I think in terms of the big bites, the things that sort of matter to the rest of the world, we are great on that one.
Okay, Daktari, your take. What's the state of the nation from where you sit, briefly?
Now, I mean, the speech, I would say, was very, it's a good speech if what was said is what would be implemented. And again, I agree with Patrick that since Ruto came into office, he has told us the economy is doing well, but we are not feeling it. So it is not doing well with us, and that is what is about the micros. Because when you go out there, and when you look at the people we interact with, they are all swimming in debt, swimming in bankruptcy. And we are also seeing people leaving. He's telling us people are coming in to invest, but like what I do, I'm always seeing people leaving. So there is a big disconnect.
There's a disconnect.
Very big disconnect.
Okay, and we'll get to that disconnect in just a few. But Dr. Olo, is the president's State of the Nation address simply out of touch?
In fact, I think that the Standard has gotten it. That the president sometimes seems to live in Malaysia, Singapore, but not in Kenya, because some of the examples he gives us, they're nice. They're nice at a lofty level. They're nice at the macro level, as Patrick says. But at the end of the day, it's either trickling or it is either coming. And you remember he came in with the bottom up, because at the end of the day, if you're going to talk about the real economics, then you implement your manifesto, which was the bottom-up manifesto. So everything you say, you must be able to relate it to how then the bottom seems to be gaining or seems to be getting traction within that economy. So the things he talks about, like now he has embarked on a very ambitious program, which he says a 7 to 10 years program. In other words, he's seeing himself beyond this term. Now that program of 5 trillion, in order to do infrastructure, is so lofty. The point is, you need to match both what you're saying at a macro level and the micro level. These countries' unemployment, for example, is bursting the seams. This country's education sector is off. Now, if you don't get those basics right, it matters not what you want to do at the top level. So yes, we have a challenge between where the executive sits and where the ordinary Kenyan sits.
Okay, because the president defended his administration's handling of the economy, saying Kenya moved from crisis to stability through deliberate fiscal and monetary reforms. And just to break down some of the statistics he gave to back this up, inflation is down to 4.6% from highs of 9.6% in 2022. The shilling was in a free fall. It's now stabilized at 129 shillings to the dollar for nearly 2 years. We're the sixth largest economy in Africa, and foreign reserves are at a high of 12 billion US dollars. So he's definitely painting a rosy picture, Obath. But at the end of the day, these gains aren't translated to the Kenyan household. Now explain why there's such a disconnect.
When you talk at that kind of level, I mean, if you look at inflation, for example, the elements that go into that inflation basket, right, are not the ones, that affect you at the bottom. If you look at the reason why I'm saying there's this disparity, the food inflation has actually gone up. It's not come down, despite the fact that we've had, the fertilizer subsidy, what have you, all those things have happened. But we've had a shortage of food. We are importing maize, we are importing wheat, we are importing rice at the same time. And all that comes in at a cost. So when you say that the person at the bottom of the pyramid will feel that they don't, right? But so the macro, that's what you're saying, the macro and the micro are actually completely at a disparity. The other thing also, when you look at the kind of things that maybe those things address, it is maybe in the city. But in the city, in the high part of the city. If you go to the informal settlements, if you go to the rural areas, the reality is completely different. Those macros do not respond to them. The good things they've done, for example, is the social, the sort of the safety net that they're giving people money at that level. But that money is used for consumption, not for production, because the services that those people would normally get are not there. Much as we talk about the social health, we talk about education, and all those things that have improved. But when you go down to the lower level, people are still having to put money into education. People are still having to put money into almost everything. Whilst we are stocking, shares working, all these things, people still have to get into their pockets. And you hear that every day. So that is where you find that we can be very bullish about the economy and the way it's going, but that economy is not hitting the right place.
Okay,
right?
Mugasha.
And I think even what you've talked about in terms of bringing in investments. Yes, investments have come in, but at what rate? Yeah. In other places, you got investors coming in by the truckload. You go to Ethiopia, the investors are going there by the truckload, but they're not coming here by the truckload. And there is something that is not right.
Why are they not coming by the truckload? Unpredictable tax policies, what do you pin it on?
There is a lot. I mean, first of all, you put that thing on, our policy certainty in this country is almost negative. You may come in, you've done all your calculations as an investor, you've looked at your loans, you've looked at everything, and the minute you invest, the interest rates have changed. VAT has changed. Taxes have been added. The rules have changed. And when all that happens, I have come in to invest on a long-term basis. And the minute I invest, you've changed the rules against which I invested. I will not come to a country that is like that. So if we don't have policy certainty, right, then we'll have a problem. And saying policy certainty does not mean policies cannot change. What it means is that if there's going to be a change in policy, you give the investor and those who have invested a period of time. So you say, for example, we are going to increase this by 10%. You say it will happen in 3 years' time. So everybody knows that in 2028, the rate of VAT is going to change from this to this.
Yeah.
Which means that I can then recalculate, the growth of my business, and if I need to go and renegotiate the amount of money I've borrowed and the rates and everything else, I've got time to make that happen. So by the time the changes happen, I am ready. But not that every year there is a potential for change. That is not good for business.
Okay, Mugashi, as you come in, the president is buoyed by the fact that perhaps the cost of unga has gone down due to increased maize production in the country. But speak to the realities of Kenyan households, because many are facing erosion of purchasing power, shrinking disposable incomes, and this might have been caused by increased taxation, statutory deductions, which is a reality to most Kenyan households. Well, what are these households facing in the backdrop of such a rosy picture that has been painted by President William Ruto?
The people in Kenya are not, they cannot benefit from that rosy picture. One of the reasons is that the price of something like unga may have come down. But what about the price of the other commodities? That's only one commodity. The prices of the other commodities have gone up, like oil and the others. Mm-hmm. Now, the amount of money that we spend in the household is actually, in Kenya, it is a balance. It is the balance of what we spend to do our individual economic development, education, health, shelter. After you have covered all that, that is when you have the money that you spend at home, because you cannot start cooking if you are living on the street. So you have to pay house rent first. The house rents have not gone down. In fact, they have gone up. Education. We all know that education is in a crisis. People are told education is free, but they are still paying. Parents with university and college students, since the new system came in, they have had to pay instead of being subsidized or rather supported by the government through the help, which the students used to pay after they start working. Now the parents have to pay. So at the household level, there is a lot of pressure even to provide food for the family, to provide clothes for the children, to provide water and the others. Now, then you come to infrastructural services like water and electricity. What are we seeing? Nowadays, we are always getting water rationed, and therefore what do you have to do? You have to buy water from a vendor, and that water is very expensive, and secondly, you are not even assured of the health, the health quality of the water. You end up with hospital cases. Now, in this country, everybody today is scared, except members of parliament who have a super health scheme. Everybody is worried that if you go to hospital, you might spend the rest of your life paying that bill. So the households are having extremely high pressure on the finances available for them, for their own sustenance and growth. That is what is happening.
Okay, and that seems to be the reality in most Kenyan households. But as we progress with this conversation, I'd like to take our focus to what the president termed as national imperatives. He mentioned that there are 4 major national priorities for Kenya. The first priority is investing in people through education and scientific research. And he mentioned that the education budget has been boosted to 700 billion. The second priority is water systems, building dams, mega dams, whatnot, to collect and store water to make sure our food supply is secure and bring additional land under irrigation. The third priority is energy, Manufacturing and industrialization consume energy, hence the need to boost the national grid. And the fourth national priority is transport and logistics. And that's where he broke down the scaling up of the transport network, 2,500 kilometers of highways for dualling, 28,000 kilometers roads to be tarmacked over 10 years, onboarding PPPs in modernizing the airports and whatnot. The list goes on. So, Olo, from where you sit, it's quite ambitious. What's your initial assessment of these priority areas and how exactly we'll get to fund them?
He reminds me of the so-called Big Five during the second term of the Ruto. And there are things you talk about and they take a long-term perspective to achieve. If you talk about manufacturing, you're looking at a long-term, 10 to 15 to 20 years, so that you can actually begin to even reap the results. So when you wake up in a speech and you say these are the top priorities and you say they'll be achieved between 5 to 10 years, one needs to ask, where are the economics of this? Where is the analysis of this? And where is the long-term, medium-term, and short-term aspects to it? And then you also begin to look at where are the backward and forward linkages in this whole discussion. For example, there's absolutely nothing wrong in doing the dualling and the roads, as he mentioned, and you know people are clapping because he was mentioning their areas, and that's okay. The question is, when you go and do a PPP, and you do it like expressway, or you do it like SGR, what kind of returns are you generating, particularly for the local economy? Are you going to outsource everything, including the labor, where the SGR is even being, the trains are being moved by foreigners and so on, where are the parts coming from and so on? So my take would be, and this is the challenge we have, in 3 years' time, there is only so much you can do as a government. So there's no point in trying to be ambitious and trying to demonstrate what cannot be achieved in 3 years. Even in the 5 or 7 years, there's only so much you can do. What is important is put the right policy frameworks, policy parameters, and then put the plans and put the technocratic support around it so that we can achieve. Remember, we had the Vision 2030. We had good goals there. It's not far from now. Vision 2030 is not far. What did we do to that plan? How much of it have we ever implemented it? We then are talking about bottom-up. We have forgotten it. Now we are on top. These are the priorities. What assurance do we have that these are well thought out and once they are implemented, we are going to see the economic returns and the benefits, particularly going down to the people's level. When you talk about investment in education, every parameter is indicating that we are not doing the right investment. And yes, you can say we have a budget. But if we are going to release capitation to secondary schools at the end of this term, and you are not even releasing enough, if you are going to hear, and you saw that, and I think it's in today's papers, the private universities are saying you are owing us 58 billion shillings. So what are you doing? What are you saying? Yes, you have a budget, but are you disbursing? Are you able to, actually meet the needs as they arise? So then it remains good statements, but not actionable.
Okay, and in case our audience is wondering how exactly the government will be able to finance this development ambition, the president highlighted that there are two key financing vehicles that were afforded by the president. And Nobath, we'd like your input on this. He mentioned the National Infrastructure Fund and the Sovereign Wealth Fund. And he sort of broke it down in terms of the Sovereign Wealth Fund will give full respect to constitutional principles of intergenerational equity, where a portion of royalties from natural resources will be put there, and equally mentioning matters to do with that other fund. How practical are these two funds in terms of achieving this ambitious development projects?
Actually, just to get it right, he said two ways. One is PPPs and then the sovereign fund, and that he's looking to the sale of parastatals as a beginning point to build up the national infrastructure fund.
Under the sovereign fund.
Yes, so Patrick can help to enlighten us on that.
I've got a bit of skepticism on this. How many funds have we had in this country? Let's just go back historically. We've had all sorts of funds that are supposed to impact the economy. We had the Women's Fund, we had all these funds that have happened in the past. The National Health Insurance Fund, and
the poverty eradication.
Poverty eradication, whatever. We have had funds upon funds upon funds, all of them with very, very good intentions and crafted very well. Our problem is delivery as a country. These funds are great. I mean, they worked in other countries, and the president talked about them.
Exactly.
Yeah, I've lived in countries where these things actually work. But they work for very good reasons. One, they are created by probably an act of parliament, but they're not run by the government. Yeah, that's the first thing. They are run by a group of professional people who have nothing to do with government, and if government wants to come into that place, they have to apply like anybody else who's coming into that place. And there are criteria for using that fund. So we are talking now about all these things that already have been decided. Then you're saying, how do we fund them? You create a fund. That sovereign wealth fund is not being created to actually manage sovereign wealth. It is given a name to say we need to put money here so we can fund these other things that you've already decided. It's lopsided, it's the other way around. Let us get the money into a place that is properly managed, away from the vagaries of government. And then we start putting money into that place. Once there is sufficient money, then we start talking about how you're going to spend that money. But here we're talking about 1.5 trillion worth of projects that have already been decided. And because we can't go to the World Bank to borrow, we can't go to this place to borrow and that place, let us do it differently. But you want to spend 1.5 trillion. That is not the way to talk about these funds. They're great ideas. I believe in them and I believe they can work. I've seen them working in Norway, where I spent some time. I've seen them working in Singapore. I was living in Malaysia next door, and you saw those things happening. And even Brunei, which I lived, the place I was living in was actually Brunei one side, and in Malaysia and Singapore was on the other side.
Okay.
Brunei, people did not pay rent for houses, they didn't pay for anything, because the sovereign wealth fund in that country was generated from oil revenues. They then invested that, and it's the income from that fund that they're using, not the money that is coming in to be put in the fund so it can grow. And that is the mistake that I'm hearing in the words that I'm hearing. We are taking money by selling the parastatals into a sovereign wealth fund, and then you're spending it. It has not grown. So I think it's the execution that we have a problem with. The idea of all these funds is great. And if it worked.
And you're talking about an endowment.
Yeah,
an endowment, you do not spend the principal, you spend the interest.
The interest.
And to build that
Precisely.
endowment takes a process.
Exactly.
So it's not just a statement you're making.
Okay. So still with you, Abath, this PPPs in terms of upgrading our infrastructure, airports and whatnot, we've had the president speak about it and he's been quite emotive. We're the laughing stock of our airport right here. Rwanda have a similar PPP and they're building a proper airport right there. How do we go about this? Because we know some of our airports infrastructure is wanting, but the manner in which PPPs is executed leaves Kenyans raising questions. If you can recall what happened earlier with Adani, how should we approach this?
I think the implementation of PPPs and how we are actually going around it is not the right way. The PPP, the directorate in the Ministry of Finance, in the Treasury, we have got all these projects and we say we want to do them with PPPs. PPPs are born of an idea. You have a social need that you want to meet. Whether it's an airport, whether it's a road, whether it's a health facility, whatever, you say, we have this need. And then you put it out there, and then people come and say, okay, fine, people bid. Then you come and discuss how the PPP is going to be implemented. What is the government going to put into that PPP? And a lot of the times what the government does is to put policy, is to put a bit of capital in, they may give some land and so forth. So these are the things that the government can do without spending money, although they add money or they add value to the PPP. The investor who comes in has got to get a return out of that PPP.
Of course.
Now, the government will moderate how that investment is going to be repaid. And you then discuss about, for example, the expressway, you discuss how much toll you're going to pay, right? But the other thing that's got to happen with the PPP, there's always got to be a non-cost alternative. Like for roads, this expressway was done extremely well. You have the one that you pay, and downstairs, though not properly done and completed, is the Old Uhuru Highway and the Mombasa Road. That should actually be in a very, very good condition. So those who don't want to pay are not feeling disadvantaged by the presence of the PPP. So the way we originate PPPs has got to change. It's not that the government has got something they want and they want a partner, a private partner. Because I've already decided what wants to be done.
So that what Patrick is saying is that a PPP as a concept is a good idea. But you don't start by identifying the partner and then you decide what project they go in. You make it competitive and you create value so that the people that are coming to invest in it can actually bid and you get best value for it. Here, we are already saying, and you will see it in another 3 months, we are already saying we are back to Adani. So we already know who we want. And so a lot of these things are going to be generated in a way that they are not cost effective, they are not competitive, they are not value driven in terms of if you are not going to get the best of it, then you are only going to lose as a country. So if we are going to have our friends, Joseph here brings his friends, I bring my friends, to do the PPPs, it's the country that loses from the opportunity cost.
But you also have the other one, which is a privately initiated proposal.
Yeah.
Right? Those are also there. I can see something, and from the outside, the government hasn't even thought about it, but I think I can do it in a particular way.
Yeah.
We have to have a process by which that is evaluated within full sight of the public. Because a lot of these private initiatives, whatever, are done quietly, and then you're told we have somebody that we've agreed with. The PPP Act actually requires that it's done transparently with the public. So even the privately initiated proposals, those should also have a very clear process whereby, as the citizens of Kenya, we can see the thing progressing, right? And you then say, this guy has got a great idea, we put all the safeguards in, and we are happy that that thing is going to happen, although it is being sourced from one person who came in. And I think the essence of all these things, and I think that is one of the things we have a problem with in this country, is a trust deficit that exists between the populace of the country and the government, right? And it's not just this government, it's a lot of governments from before. The trust deficit is very high. And until we get that out of the way and we have a lot of transparency, and there has to be a lot of transparency at the beginning so that people begin to trust the processes, which are on paper are excellent, but people just do not trust. And if they find the smallest whiff of anything, it becomes a big scandal. X is a very, very, very effective tool these ways of magnifying those things.
Now, Jesse, in the whole of this speech, there's something that is conspicuously missing. The rule of law. In all the whole speech, I never heard anywhere where the president is talking about the rule of law. And yet we know all these things we are discussing, including the conclusion on the trust, is about the rule of law. The issue about erratic changes in the policies, again, it is about the rule of law. Excuse me. So, for this country to work and for what the president is talking about to work, we must address the rule of law. We must restore the country back to the course of rule of law. Because when we don't do that, corruption is part of rule of law, public theft, and public wastage. It is all part of rule of law. So as long as the president will talk and skirt around that issue, of which we know this government has a very big problem with, then this is just rhetoric. It's just talk, just like we have had before. And I would say, we normally say that when you govern the country, lead and govern the country within the rule of law, then you get predictability. The people can predict the action of government. Once you get predictability, you earn reliability. And once you have reliability, then you get the trust, confidence, and faith of the people. So that we know that if I invest today, we are doing the elections in the next less than 2 years, then I know that I won't have to stop working because there is an election.
Okay.
Because the rule of law is in operation, and election will just be another activity. But now, what are we seeing? The whole country is under the control of so-called goons. But these goons, we are seeing, they are actually militias owned by individual politicians. So again, coming to the question of why investors are not coming here, they won't come when they know that there only needs to be a small upheaval and your business is burned down. So the president must address the rule of law, get the country back to the rule of law.
Okay. One other thing he didn't mention is the fight against corruption. Because Dr. Law, we've heard from the Auditor General, control of budget, matters to do with budgeted corruption, matters to do with unexplained expenditures by be it the executive. How exactly does the president lead this fight without talking about it? And mind you, not too long ago during the devolution conference, he put the very members of parliament he was praising today on the spot, mentioning they're soliciting for bribes through committees. So are we serious about this fight at the end of the day?
I think let's give the president the benefit that he has never made corruption an agenda. He has never, not in his speeches, not in his manifesto. So every time he talks, he does not have the thinking that corruption is an issue in this country. So we must respect that because he doesn't believe it is. Unfortunately, it is the elephant in the room. All that we are talking about, and even as Patrick was talking about policy certainty, you see, it's an act, or even rule of law, it's an act of corruption where you have no certainty on policy and that any change can happen at any time so that whoever can make the most or lose the most happens to be on the scene. So that today you give me incentives to come, tomorrow you change those incentives. It means that I make net losses and somebody else makes gain. Now that's subverting systems, subverting policy positions, then people benefit unfairly. Yeah. So if we are going to follow the rule of law, if we are going to look for fair play, if we are going to allow systems to work and policies that are certain to work, if we are going to go for ease of doing business, if we are going to make it possible that from my desk I can apply for that license and get it and go on and bring in my business. That's what people are looking for. So when you're looking at, we are comparing ourselves like Rwanda, and sometimes we compare ourselves to Japan. Japan, corruption is a shame. There's a point at which if you are, found in that, you will be the first one to sort yourself before even the state gets you. But for us here, it's not a shame. In fact, the more corrupt you are, the more likely to be in office or to even gain office and so on. So let's agree that it is the elephant in the room. It is the biggest problem for us. The pilferage and leakage of our resources is the problem. You can put the budget, as he say, but the problem is even the Ministry of Education itself says that they have lost billions through ghost schools. How do you say that? We have given you money, and you have disbursed the money, and you come and say that you've taken it to a ghost school and you're okay, and you go scot-free, and you're a public official. That's
you get another allocation.
Yeah, that's mockery. Mockery.
I think that, corruption is an area that I am quite passionate about. I think it was in 2018, we had a national corruption conference at Bomas. where the then president of the country actually came and he stopped government business. And everybody, PSs, ministers, heads of parastatal, everybody gathered at Bomas that day. And there had been, it was a concerted effort between the private sector, the government, the religious, the religious sector, everybody together. And I remember the then president was put on the spot. We had the head of the judiciary, the president, we had the chief of police, all the people who were there in terms of the action on corruption. They were read the people's wishes individually. And they were quite arduous, quite intense. And the president was actually told what the people think. And he accepted it and said, I will do something about it. Now, we need, in this country, if we're going to fight corruption, we need some very bold statements right from the top of the nation. We need to have measurable targets that actually will track the change or the improvement in the corruption space in this country. The legislation has to be itself such that people will realize that corruption is not going to be tolerated. It is not even supposed to be a right to defense. In countries where they're serious about corruption, somebody is mentioned and they resign from office. There was a British minister the other day, a lady who resigned because she didn't declare her tax properly because of a housing thing. Now that, here guys would say Rinini, but that is a matter of principle and national values that we have. We don't have those. Chapter 6, which was put in the Constitution for a very, very good reason, is these days treated like a football. It's treated like a football. And people are not talking about their rights versus chapter 6. All in the same constitution, they're trying to play one against the other, which is not right. But the key thing is that it has to start from the top. And in the private sector where I belong, even a CEO of a company, if there is any evidence anywhere that something has gone wrong, you will step aside and you will be investigated. Here, investigate me first. I'm innocent until proven guilty, but I'm going to sit in my chair. You try and take me out.
Okay.
I think that is the individual. And when people talk like that, they are setting the bad example for this country.
Okay, I'd like us to talk about the agricultural sector because this is one of the lifeline of the nation. Largest contributor to the high cost of living is the high cost of food. And the president broke down some of the gains that have been made in this sector. According to him, over 7.1 million farmers have been registered. Fertilizer subsidy program, 7 million bags have been delivered this year to farmers, and the next year's goal is 12.5 million bags. Maize harvest has risen from 44 million in 2022 to 67 million bags in 2024. And the list goes on in terms of the coffee sector, the tea sector earnings, which have risen from 138 to 215 billion. You're a veterinary doctor in your other life, Daktari, and this might be an area that is close to your heart. How exactly does Kenya achieve food security? Or better yet, how do we become net exporters or net importers?
The first thing is that we have to go back to, again, the rule of law.
Okay.
We've got to go back there because that is where corruption belongs. I find it very difficult nowadays to attend a government conference because the figures keep banging in my ears, and I've heard these figures. Today, I listened to those figures. They sounded like I was in a government conference. Now, we always say in governance that government is not supposed to be explained. You are not supposed to explain the work or the achievements of government. We, the citizens, or those who are governed, are supposed to feel it and see it. But you're not supposed to go there and tell people, you know, last year we produced 100 million bags of maize, and people are not seeing the maize on the ground. People are not seeing the flour on the ground. They are not seeing the prices going down because of your production. Government is supposed to be felt, is supposed to be seen, but not to be explained. This was all about explaining government achievements.
Yeah.
But when you step out there, everybody is crying. And you can see, I normally say that you don't need to be told how hungry people look like. You only need to see them. You don't need to be told how happy people look like. You only need to see them. So when you walk in the streets of Nairobi, when you look even at the crowds that go for meetings, you can see Kenyans are hungry. You can see it from the face and from the body. You can see that Kenyans are struggling. Where are all these achievements? So let's come to agriculture.
Yeah, definitely.
Now, if you want to grow the economy, you need to concentrate on the sectors or subsectors that generate new money. And new money comes from new products or new services as products. Agriculture is one such sector, and a very big one, because from water, air, and soil, plus seeds or cuttings or whatever, we produce food material. And everybody needs food. Now, if you want to build any country, you must first feed the people. Because if you don't feed the people, you spend all the money on food. And imported food is very expensive, as we have seen and as we are seeing. So in agriculture, we need to give priority to productive agriculture, not importing things and processing, but growing food, because we have the climate, we have the soil, we have the water. But we are not managing our basic resources, water and soil and labor. We are not managing them properly. And also even seeds, we are not managing properly. So we need to have, for us to be self-sufficient in food, we have to manage, first of all, we have to have a good production policy, whereby you even give incentives to the farmers, because farming is patriotic duty. You feed the nation. So we have an incentive program where farmers are protected from losses. This is another very unpredictable business. So you protect the farmer, whether they are crop farmers or they are livestock farmers. Yeah, that is what we need to do. And then from there, we have to be very honest that we are actually delivering the inputs to the people, and we have the factories needed to produce most of the inputs locally. As long as we are importing, we are not going to manage.
Actually, I just wanted to weigh in on that. About 7 years ago, the country had a policy where we are saying that we are going to become a net exporter to the world of a lot of things. Now, if you get to that kind of economy of scale, right, in everything that we do, then the cost of everything will come down and become affordable and available. So the Kulalu irrigation project, right? That should have been a focus. If I was the president of this country, I'd spend half my time down there and make sure that that thing's delivering, because to deliver in that place does not take a year. You can crowd in the investment, you can do everything else. If you focus on that kind of thing, you're done. The other thing that needs to be done, we're going to do a lot of dams in this country, and I think that was spoken about. Go back to basics. We had a lot of water before. We were deforested. And a lot of people have cut down all the trees and everything else to grow subsistence food in the rural areas. Populations are basically expanding and taking away all those things. When I was growing up, you'd walk less than a kilometer and get a spring of water coming out. That meant that the aquifers in this country had water. Those aquifers are all dry. And aquifers are very simple underground storage. for water. If we go back and just establish those things and reforest and do what countries like Morocco have done, they have actually gone and normally we put wells to take water out of the ground. They have put wells to put water in to the ground, which increasing the contact surface area so water can go down. And that way you can recharge the aquifers very, very rapidly. And if you do that, you don't need to do any other infrastructure. You just put boreholes and water comes out. And that means that the areas which are semi-arid at the moment, where there used to be water before, can become productive very quickly.
Okay.
And these are very, very simple things that are not mega projects. They are simply curing and putting plaster on those things that we put wounds on. And I think we need to change the thinking from mega projects to simple solutions.
I have to talk about the education sector, and we have a scholar right here. The president mentioned how the education sector reforms have been forthcoming, the student funding model, over 500,000 students benefiting from it, 76,000 teachers hired so far, with the goal next year being 100,000. 23,000 new classrooms delivered in conjunction with NGCDF. Enrollment at TVET is roughly at 718,000. But it goes without saying there's a multitude of challenges in this particular sector, starting from delayed capitation. We talk about reduced capitation. If you're talking about frequent industrial action by lecturers, or is it teachers? How do we bring back sanity to this very important sector? So improve access, equity, and quality.
Let us begin by making some critical observations. Number one, the Gen Zs that are actually today so well educated, so well informed, able to read, able to even analyze a finance bill, are a product of an education policy that Mike Kibaki put in place when he said he wants universal access to education. And that has given us benefits. So investing in education, being deliberate about it, is likely to give us results. What we need to be very clear about is that this government has not been very clear as to what it wants to do in education. Right now, you're talking about, let's just look at junior second school. You cannot run junior second school on the basis of interns who have 1-year contract. What are you saying? How sure are they that they are going to continue? What kind of promise do you give parents to be able to be assured? Generally, you cannot run an education program where you keep on talking about it is expensive, it is no longer going to be free. It is never free. When you say that there is universal access, it means that somewhere taxes are being used to fund that education. So the issue of saying free is not the case, that all of us as Kenyans with children in school or not, when we are paying taxes and our taxes are being used in that manner, we are assuring the investment of in people, as the president is saying. This president, you cannot fault him for speaking the right things, for doing the right talk, and perhaps even speaking to the international community, even the intellectual community. The problem is, he says the right things, but how do we implement those right things? To talk about numbers is okay, but what's the quality behind those numbers? To talk about, and you see, we're no longer talking about 100% transition. Remember, at some point we were talking about transition. Now, we just talk about numbers, but those numbers are not compared to anything else. They are this number here as compared to how many, and how many have we since lost out there. Same to university. If you are going to grow the education sector, then you also want to grow the entire chain, so that again you start looking at, so what kind of education, what kind of skills, what kind of employable personnel are you producing, and where's that market for them? Right now we say that, and then we talk about we are looking for jobs for people in some countries. You cannot grow an economy by exporting people, exporting labor. That could be a short term, but certainly you want to create the ability within a country for people to be productive and for people to be employed. So I would say that we are actually witnessing a slow erosion. If you remember, it took 49 days the other day for university sector to come back for lecturers to go back to classroom. Over what? Pay. Of course, we need to look at the entire education sector. If there are any reforms, let us be serious about it. If we want to also liberalize the education sector so that some of the costs that the government is incurring can actually be incurred by private sector, let's look at that. But we need a holistic approach to it, not a piecemeal. We need quality to it, not just quantity to it.
I'd like to weigh in on this because if you look at the health sector, it's all about pay. Look at education, it's all about pay. Pay, pay, pay. If you have a company that cannot pay its staff, you have to do some radical things in that company. And you don't go out and borrow because you'll have to repay it at some point in time. What you do is you restructure internally so that your cost of running that company goes down. And you only retain the essential services that can allow that company to continue producing until such time as can be profitable again and be able to do that. Using that analogy with Kenya Inc., what do you need to do in Kenya Inc. for that to happen? Right? I think when you talk about education and whatever it is, the problem is actually systemic. It's inherent in the way the country's structure is. And I'll say this, and I may be very unpopular about it, but when this constitution of ours was first completed at Bomas and brought to Parliament, how many counties were there?
The Bomas
17.
said
17.
17.
There were 17.
regions,
17,
yeah.
yes.
17. Why were there 17 counties at that time? It was about economically productive units. That was what it was. But then they exploded to 47. Now 47 has got costs. So the costs of government overall is beyond what the economy of this country can maintain sustainably.
Okay.
And that is our root, that's the root cause of all our problems, right? There's a whole load of other things in that place as well. But we really need to re-look at the country's structure as we see all these things, which are all just symptoms of a core problem that we have as a country.
Okay.
So education, yes, there's a lot of issues there, but let's go back to the core issue that needs to be addressed.
The basics. Briefly, Dr. Ari, something to do with matters education?
With education.
Yes, yes.
Excuse me. Excuse me. Yeah, I
Sorry
got the water
about
badly,
that. Yeah.
Sorry. Now, in this country, we have gone out of planning. Again, we go back to we talked about Vision 2030. Right now, we are going without a plan. We dropped Vision 2030, and we don't know where we are going. And there is nothing worse than a country going without a plan. We had a very good definition of what are public goods and what are private goods. Education was classified as a public good because it is the base of development of human capital. And but particularly with this government, education has been pushed aside and not given any coherent structure. And if you ask me, even changing the 844 system, I didn't see the need. Because we never saw, our people were still going outside the country. We have worked out there. You have never seen a Kenyan returned home because he could not perform. And there is an international standard on education.
Okay.
So we need to focus our education on a clear structure that you can run for a sufficiently long period of time, not changing all the time.
Okay, so as we finalize, because time is up, unfortunately, well, how would you rate the president? Not too long ago, he was in an Al Jazeera interview. He rated himself 8 out of 10 in terms of actualizing the promises he handed on the campaign trail. And of course, we're basing this on the plan, the Kenya Kwanza manifesto. So briefly, as we finalize, is he moving towards the right direction, or are we moving back? Is it a case of 2 steps forward, 5 steps backwards? How would you rate this administration as we finalize briefly, starting with you, Dr. Martin?
You see, this is the only country where the president rates himself top while Kenyans write him down. So I would tell him that when he sees himself at 8,
Yeah.
for me as a teacher who grades students, I think he's at 4 out of 10.
At best.
And the thing is that when it comes to rhetoric, when it comes to good speeches, when it comes to good promises, that one, excellent. We can give him excellent.
Okay.
Now, what we are challenging him to do is
Yeah.
to translate those lofty, nice statements into action.
All right.
And that's where he loses it.
Okay. Patrick, briefly.
I think I'd go the same way as Secretary said. I think in terms of vision and everything there that is seen up there, 8 out of 10. Delivery, 4 out of 10.
Simple.
I'll be very radical and I'll give him 2 out of 10. Reason, he came to class and set his own curriculum. We had a curriculum for him, he has refused to follow. So whatever he does is not working for us. As a teacher, I will give you 1 or 2 out of 10 for coming to class and writing something. That's what he's getting from me.
All right. Well, he has 1 year, 9 months to go, I think, till the next general election. Let's see if the rhetoric changes and he delivers. Patrick Obath, it was a pleasure to have you with us. Equally joined by Dr. Joseph Mugashia and Dr. Martin Olo. Definitely taking a look at the state of the nation, and you've heard it from the horse's mouth. A lot more needs to be done. My name is Jesse Rogers. That's how we end tonight's edition of KTN Prime. Enjoy the rest of your viewing. Good.